And basically, we are as thinking in terms of selves all the time, which we do like 99.99999% of the time. We tend to find the stories about the realities being much more interesting than the understanding of the reality itself, because the understanding of the reality is so rare. How often does it ever happen? And so we get stuck in the stories, and instead of being able to have, or not to have, but instead of there being conditions for, say, sati or sati sampajanya to arise, to have an understanding of a reality arising in a particular moment. So I guess there's always, and every time we ask the question, what can we do, we can't ask that question really, because it involves the idea of a self doing something all the time. And the more we can understand that, it's all because of conditions. This to me has been the most helpful thing, is increasing understanding of conditions, that there's not a self there that can do it. The other day, my son, he loves to, I have to say, argue with me. My son's a Buddhist monk, for those of you who don't know me. And the other day, of course, there were conditions for anger to arise. My husband had said something, and that created conditions for anger to arise. And my son said, "Mom, I don't understand. You study all this Dhamma with your teacher, and yet anger, you still get angry." I said, "Yeah, well, because there are conditions for the anger to arise, so I got angry." He said, "I got angry and there's a sense of self in the process of being angry." And he said, "Mom, if you would do what I've been telling you for the last 19 years," he's been a monk for 19 years, "if you do what I tell you for the last 19 years, you would be able to control your anger." I said, "Excuse me, who's controlling the anger? Who can control it? When anger arises, can you say, 'Oh, stop it right now'? Can you do it?" He says, "Mom, if you sit, meditate, do some other meditation. If you sit meditation, and the more you sit meditation, the more you'll be able to control your mind." I said, "Excuse me, what is the mind? Who's doing the controlling, Tan?" I said, "You're a monk. You learned about anatta. How come so? And this goes on and on and on all the time with my son. It's very frustrating. It creates dosa. Okay, frustration is dosa. Okay, one form of it, and it creates dosa all the time because he's been trained to think that there is a being here that must do something in order to have understanding arise. But there's not, a being cannot sit there and say, "Okay, 5 o'clock, we're going to read this," and then the understanding. It just doesn't happen. And so the more we understand the nature of conditions, because somebody asked that a few minutes ago, the more we understand the nature of conditions, I think the more there are conditions themselves to understanding that there can be no forcing an understanding to arise. It arises when it arises, because the conditions are there for it to arise. And that's all there is to that. So when my son says, "You've been studying Dhamma all these years and you can't control your anger," well, the only thing I can say to him is that you're going to have to study anatta and conditions a little bit more. Sorry, that's the way it is. So that's, I think, the understanding of conditions is extremely important. And at least, and then of course John was talking about the 3 levels of understanding. Pariyati level, Patipati level, and Pativeda level. the understanding that arises at pariyatti is when we are in the process of studying or reading, listening, or whatever we're doing. There's some understanding, but it's not the direct understanding of a reality that arises at a particular moment. So this is something that has to be that we need to think about more often, perhaps, and contemplate on, investigate. Anyway, that's enough.
So it's impossible to control anger. The first step is to learn to understand its characteristic as only a reality, a dhamma, which arises because of conditions, and it takes a long time because the sotapanna, the person who has reached the first stage of enlightenment, still has anger but doesn't take it for self anymore. So the wrong view of self has to be eradicated first, and then there is a long way to the third stage of enlightenment, the stage of the anagami, who has eradicated dosa, because the anagami does not cling anymore to sense objects, because the clinging to sense objects conditions aversion. So the first thing that has to be done is knowing all the different realities that appear, so the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body sense and the mind, and know their characteristics, so that little by little they are understood as just dhammas, which have their own conditions to arise.
When attachment to sense objects is removed, and I think he then said, and therefore there is no more dosa. Is that what you said? That was a condition, like the attachment was a condition for dosa to arise.
So there are no more dosa also, no more aversion.
But is attachment the only condition for dosa to arise?
Also ignorance, because ignorance arises with each unwholesome moment or akusana.
And also, of course, the accumulated tendency for dosa, which is eradicated, and anagami path.
Thank you.
Attachment to sensuous object, but still there is also attachment to be left for arahata magga to eradicate. The attachment to becoming.
We will talk about visible object maybe before anything else. Maybe a little bit about hardness or a little bit about hearing, but always coming back to visible object. And we know that that is the first thing that the Buddha mentions when he lists that which comes to chitta through the senses. Could you say a little bit more about why there is the emphasis on visible object?
If everyone knows about visible object, we don't need to say more. But now that is visible object, who knows it? That what is seen is just that reality which can impinge on the eyebase. Eyebase cannot impinge on the eyebase, people and things cannot, but that reality only can impinge on the eyebase. So who knows that now? What visible object is? No people, nothing in it at all. Just that reality which as soon as one opens one's eyes, it's there. No need to say about it because it appears. Without it, can there be the idea of people and things without visible objects? Can they be seen? No. But seeing says what? This is the point, to understand reality as it is. Otherwise it cannot eradicate the idea of self at all, because there's always something with the seen, but in reality, only a reality can be seen. Before there can be no one in it, it takes quite a long time to consider, not just listen and then forget. But now it appears, so it's time to talk about it, to understand it more and more.
Its own conditions, not we who try, that is impossible. But from the beginning we should realize that there is no self who can do anything at all. So we cannot do anything.
For example, earlier we were talking about how consciousness is momentary and how the consciousness that sees is different from the consciousness that hears or thinks about what is seen and heard. And before we heard that, it may not have, I'm sure it wouldn't have occurred to us to think of things in that way. But once, if that's heard and then there, because there is seeing and hearing and thinking now, then there's an opportunity to, in a sense, verify whether what we've heard is in accordance with the way things appear to be. So that's an example of how gradually understanding can begin from hearing things and properly considering what we've heard. But another factor has to be added in, and that is the fact that there has that understanding has been accumulated already. And so it's a matter of, the question could also be, because the Dhamma has been heard perhaps in previous lifetimes. And so another way of putting the question is, what are the conditions for that accumulated understanding to arise in this lifetime? And the answer is the same, that the explanation of the way things are has to be heard again, because it cannot be recalled, and that is what is unique about a Buddha, that he was able to develop understanding in that lifetime without actually hearing it from another person. For the rest of us, it's, as Nina said, it's hearing and reflecting on what's been heard.
I think I just like to understand Buddhism better. And I personally learn well in a personal context like this. So if you would give me a lot of books, it would be more difficult for me, but I like to just be part of a group that has experienced that. So it's curiosity, I think, mostly.
And you heard about the teachings of the Buddhas.
Yes, but very little. I know very little.
Yes. May I ask, what did you get from hearing?
Maybe I can describe it as a contrast from my background being in Christianity. The way I think I've encountered Buddhism is that it analyzes life by saying, well, we see there's a lot of suffering in this reality, and where does that suffering come from? It comes from our attachment to things, and so if we could somehow overcome that attachment, we could also overcome the suffering. It's very probably overly simplified, but that is very much a contrast with some other religions that I'm more familiar with. So that's something I got.
Do you think that we come here to understand whatever appears as the Buddha taught? Mm-hmm. Because we cannot have the idea about it at all. For example, seeing, no idea. Do you see but we don't know what seeing is. But now from hearing that seeing is a reality, it's real, it arises, it sees, that's all. So whatever arises and falls away, can it be taken for I or something stay permanent? Not at all. That's why what we are interested is the truth of life, of whatever appears now as it is. For example, we think of I see, I from birth up to now. But actually, without the different realities arising from moment to moment, there can never be the idea of I. But the arising and falling away of everything which has arisen is so very rapidly, because the next object in the next moment just covers the falling away of the previous one. So now it's not the same seeing as we have seen just a moment ago. Everything is like this, but it seems like everything lasts and nothing arises and falls away. That's why we learn to understand that we were born and hear and see, and everything in life only very temporary. And life is so short, and if there is no understanding of whatever appears now at all, there must be more and more ignorance at moment of seeing, because after seeing there can be understanding or ignorance depending on conditions. If there is no hearing about the truth of seeing at all, there must be ignorance about it and wrong understanding which takes the seeing for I all life, all in my life. Never have any understanding about seeing that can be understood and can be directly experienced, the arising and falling of it, when panya or right understanding develops on and on and on, enough to begin to understand that it's just a moment, only a moment of seeing. It's not the moment of hearing or thinking or other moments at all. And since it is conditioned to arise, it falls away no more, it doesn't come back. Nothing can come back after it has fallen away. So life is like this, just keep on going and going and going, never return. So what is the best thing in one's life? First of all,